What I love about technology and where I sit right now on the human level, I feel like there is a huge need for more show and less tell. What are these new technologies that are solving human problems, and how can we start sharing that information in a way that is just not speaking from the stage? Because I don't know about you, but everyone starts to sound the same. Products and services are not standing out like they should. You've heard pitches. They're boring. A lot of them are just boring.
My name's Sabrina Ramna. Super excited today to be speaking with Meredith Grundei. She's one of the top public speaking coaches in the world, recognized in 2022 by Yahoo with a TikTok following of over 100,000 people. And really excited to learn about how she's using AI in her work with her clients to improve public speaking. Meredith, we'd love to learn a little bit about your background.
Yeah, I'm so excited to be here and have this conversation with you. So I have a background as an actor. I was doing scrappy theater on stages for many years and directing and doing commercials and all this stuff. And during the pandemic, I decided to take those skill sets and start my business. The one thing that makes me unique as a speaker is I use improvisational theater as a way to get people comfortably uncomfortable and building those skill sets that they need to be extemporaneous and adaptable and so forth. But one thing I do with my clients is I have a platform that I white label through an organization called Yoodli, which is spelled YOODLI.ai. And it's essentially an AI coach for people who want to be better at speaking. And so you can, on that platform, do many amazing things if you're not working one-on-one with a human coach, which I also strongly suggest because you're going to get a different perspective. But you can do role play, for example. So let's just say that you have a big high-stakes interview coming up within a particular industry. You can go in there, set up a role play. You can custom make that with your own prompts if you want to, or use the prompts that are already within the system. And then I use it as a third party in every one-on-one session that I do. So that bot comes into my sessions, it records everything, they get the video feedback, I get to give them feedback, they get the transcript, and it pulls out things like, are you using filler words? Are you using inclusive language? You could be more concise here, and so forth. It's awesome.
I love that you mentioned interviewing as a use case, because sometimes when people think of public speaking, they think, oh, you're on the stage, you're giving a big presentation to a big audience, but actually those skills are transferable to so many other aspects of your life, whether it's an everyday meeting, whether it's, as you said, interviewing, negotiation, filming TikTok videos, doing podcasts. And so I'd love to get just a better understanding of like your first foray into this. How have you changed or evolved your approach over time as you've worked with a lot of corporate clients, especially?
That's a really great question. I feel like it's always growing and adapting like everything else around us is. At first, it started off 101 and group coaching. I was coaching people in speaking because of my improv training. So I used to work for Second City in Chicago, and then I would go into companies and I would use improv as a way to build communication and trust amongst teams. And that evolved into me coaching executives and so forth. So now where I am mostly working is with people who are very technically minded. So people in technology, for example, on how to take their services and their products and making sure that they're bringing in the human elements to the work that they're working on and presenting to customers. And sometimes it's internally to other builder groups or user groups, but it's really getting to that emotional connect and the why this is such an important product at this particular time. The other piece that I would say is I'm working with people who are leaving corporate and we're building our own businesses, and we're being asked to speak all of the time. We have to go to networking events. We show up here on podcasts. Like you named a lot of them too. It's not just about getting up on a stage. So I put together a group called Confidently Speaking, where you show up twice a week. I have 2 different classes. I give challenges. You do your 30 videos for the month. You meet other people who are also doing the same thing. So you're holding each other accountable. It's awesome.
I really love that, because one of the main things I hear from people want to start as a content creator, but they're just shy to be on camera. Like they just can't film themselves for a reason. It's a mental block. And I've experienced similar things. When I first started on TikTok, I couldn't rewatch my first videos, like probably my first 30. It was too cringe. I just hated everything about it. And so I love the idea of that kind of like accountability group and community, and especially being able to present to other people who are going through the same thing. I'm really curious to dive into your use of AI as well. So you talked about Yoodli, the app. Do you use it in that community setting as well?
People have access to it if they want to. So I host everything in Mighty Networks. And so I have all of these sources that people can use. Sometimes I'll use it, and there are some improv games that they have embedded in the program itself that you can do. I do, yes, encourage people to use it.
Awesome. Yeah. And
Yeah.
where do you draw the line between like the feedback you're getting from AI versus the feedback you would get from a one-to-one coach? And maybe this could help the audience figure out like where they should start.
Again, you're holding yourself accountable if you're using Yoodli, right? I would say having a human is great accountability. The other thing it's not really teaching you is it's not teaching you structure, which is difficult for a lot of people because we're winging it a lot of the time. No one's really taught us how to structure a presentation properly. And then there's different presentations. Also, how are we engaging with our audience? It will give you feedback on that, but in terms of like brainstorming different solutions for audience engagement, it's not going to do deep dives like that with you. It's wonderful for training yourself like a workout to eliminate those filler words. So perhaps you want to take the same script and just practice it extemporaneously without looking at it, seeing where the ums and the ahs are coming in. It will tell you analytically where those things are happening, but it's not going to tell you why those things are happening and what you should be doing differently so that you can start to, I don't say eliminate filler words, for example, but I would say manage them so you're not using as much.
That's really interesting because I say the word like all the time. When I go to edit a podcast, I can see in Premiere, like my editing thing, how many times. It's usually over 100.
Was it really? I think you've gotten better though because you're aware of it now.
I am aware of it now, and I'm at the point of like, should I try to improve that? I haven't crossed the line to be like, yes, I should try to improve that yet. But I am curious, based on research, if you were to improve these types of things, like how does that impact your career? When you think about filler words as a specific example, how does that impact your career? I'm curious what the research around that is.
I will say I can't point you to an exact research or data point, but I do know for a fact that it hurts your credibility. If you're somebody who is using a lot of filler words, and there are people who get so nervous, and let's just say they're on a sales call one-on-one, perhaps with the customer, and they start to use those filler words almost in every breath or every other word or every other sentence, and they're not aware of it, that can actually hurt the sale. If you're up on a stage and you're not prepared, a lot of times the reason why we're using so many filler words is because we're not as practiced or as prepared as we should be. That's going to impact your credibility with the audience as well. So where I can't point to a study in itself, and I know they're out there, those are the main reasons.
Yeah. I mean, early on in my career, when I did my first startup, I cared about all of these things and I was aware of it too. And I did read a book on how to use improv techniques like yes and, right? It's actually really interesting. You mentioned that you've kind of evolved to now focus on folks in technology and making sure, they're able to communicate their message, make that emotional connection with their audience, especially in the age of AI. Like ChatGPT has now changed everything. AI has now gotten mainstream, and we have a lot of questions around what is the human elements, what is important in the human elements, and how do you think about that? So how do you kind of see the future of your role helping folks become comfortable with public speaking as AI gets better and better? Where do you see it helping more, and where do you see like this is always going to be the human element? How do you see that kind of evolving over the next couple of years?
Yeah, there's a couple of things. One is I feel like it's how do we continue to create responsible prompts that are more human-centric? I feel like the public speaking, improv, all of those skill sets are going to be helpful in the development of that, even if you're just working solo. How can I take an idea as I'm developing this prompt for this AI? How can I yes and myself, not cut myself off too quickly in that development phase? And then also being able to speak more directly to who your audience is when you're putting together a prompt. So if you're a research scientist, for example, and you could create a very general prompt, which is give me an overview of this research paper, right? Or if you're talking to someone like me who's not technically brained, you might want to say, please give me a simplified version with summarized points for this research paper, right? So we start to think more about who is our specific audience member. That's also true for the stage as well. It's speaking to the person with the least amount of knowledge, but not dumbing down the information, but making sure that everybody is clear about what is being shared. And those who know more are just going to be reminded and confirmed, and they'll feel confident because they're like, I know that already. And those that don't will feel on board. I would also say what I love about technology and where I sit right now on the human level is, to me, I feel like there is a huge need for more show and less tell. So that's where I feel my expertise, especially with my theater background, is coming into play. Like, what are these new technologies that are solving human problems, and how can we start sharing that information in a way that is just not speaking from the stage? Because I don't know about you, but everyone starts to sound the same. Products and services are not standing out like they should. You've heard pitches. They're boring. A lot of them are just boring.
Yeah, and it's really interesting now that I'm a content creator. I would classify myself as an introvert. Actually, the idea of talking all day, I feel dread. And so, yeah, I am curious of what advice you have for folks like myself before I started creating content. We're coming from that background. We're building products. That's what our domain is, and all of this talking, communication stuff. If you want to be an entrepreneur, it's now your job too. So what tips do you have? Just tips for folks who are getting started, understanding, maybe they're in the awareness phase. They're realizing, oh, I should improve this really, really important area. Here are 3 things I can do now, whether it involves AI or not. What would be kind of your tips for beginners out there?
Before you became a content creator and you were just creating and developing, right? So did you ever imagine that you would feel as confident as you do now as a speaker today?
I've always gotten compliments ever since I was a kid that I was good at speaking. That's not to say I believed it, though.
Okay.
Because what changed is, before creating content, when I was running my AI startup, I would script everything as much as I could because I wasn't confident that I would say the right thing in the moment. And the problem with that is, okay, you memorize it word for word, the exact cadence. And then if you mess up once, you start to get nervous and in your head, because you realize you messed up. And even though nobody else realizes you messed up, you sound exactly the same. You sound exactly totally fine. And so I would get compliments all the time. Oh, you seemed really calm and collected. But internally, I'd be having a nervous breakdown. And that was not healthy at all. I do not recommend that approach anymore. Or trying to memorize everything super strictly, and you're super hard on yourself. And in real time, you're trying to correct yourself, and then you trip up. And then after the fact, you also don't look at the positives. You look at the ways that you messed up and deviated from the script. All of that was just terrible in terms of mental health and psychology and stability. So what kind of changed as a content creator is, due to the volume of content I was producing, I was forced to just be myself. There was no way to just script everything and just be very robotic. It was really painful the first couple of months. There was no shortcutting around it. I hated my first dozen TikTok videos. I could not rewatch them. Super cringy. But because I just forced myself to keep doing it, now I'm a lot more comfortable. But that came after months and months of just committing, sticking to it. And in a sense, I had my own accountability group because I had that audience on TikTok and Instagram. I would get real-time feedback. Was my hook good? Was my delivery good? Was it entertaining and educational? And so I'm getting that real-time feedback from social media. And so it's been quite an experience.
I love it. So you just gave the first tip. I thank you for the answer, and thank you for sharing all of that with me, because it's the consistency, it's the showing up, and it is painful and it is hard. And we fear judgment of other people. That's really what paralyzes a lot of folks, is that they just don't want to be judged by somebody else. And it is hard to hear ourselves and see ourselves as well. So I always recommend that you take it off of yourself. And what I heard you say in that is, you are there to help other people. You are in service of. And when that becomes the reason for why you show up every day, is to help other people, you take so much of that pressure off of yourself, that pressure to be perfect, that pressure to be, word for word. So that would be my biggest tip, is it's not about you.
I love that. It was my previous startup. It was all about me. What am I going to get out of this meeting? I want to accomplish this specific goal to move my startup forward, whether it's fundraising, closing a customer, selling the company, looking good, hiring employees, whatever it is. It was very self-centered. But now as a creator, it's all about, did I help someone with this content today? And if the answer is yes, I'm supremely happy. Even though I look weird on the camera, I didn't edit it, I tripped on words, whatever it is.
Yeah. I did a TikTok not too long ago where I noticed that a word was misspelled. I was like, oh, I could do the whole entire thing over again. And I think I'd listened to another TikTok creator once who said, actually, people love the mistakes because you'll get more people in your comments anyway, because they'll point
I'll
mistakes
point
out.
out the mistake. Yeah.
No, I was like, brilliant mistake, right? So that's the other thing that I love too is own your mistakes. It's okay. Just move on. Most people, and if you get comments that are negative in your feed, it's just feeding the algorithm. So allow them. I've learned over time to just develop a tough skin around that too. There's a lot of opinions out there and everyone's opinion is different than the last person's opinion. So you might as well just keep creating content.
Exactly. And you'll get to the point where you get so many comments, you don't even have time to look at the negative comments. It's just not even possible from a bandwidth perspective. But I did want to dig into something you said earlier, which is the fear of judgment. I definitely see that a lot. And one of the objections I hear, especially from people currently at companies, is like, what if I say something and it's wrong? That might negatively impact how my peers or colleagues or customers think about me. So not just the fear of looking dumb, but actually saying something wrong or messing up in a more consequential way. Let's say you reported AI news and it was wrong. What is your advice to folks who are coming at it from that perspective where they don't want to say something that could negatively truly impact their career?
Yeah, that's a tough one, but I always go back to what can you learn from it? And then how can you accept responsibility for it? And I feel that if you can turn around and say, oh my goodness, I was wrong and accept that responsibility, that's just you showing that you're A, self-aware, and B, a great communicator. And then C, if the people that you felt like you gave the wrong information to can't see that you are human and we are all beautifully flawed, then that's not yours to hold anymore. You did your part. And sadly, that I don't know how consequence-wise, it may end up in your favor, it may not. But as long as you know you did your part, there's nothing else you can really do about it from there.
And any tips for people? Let's say you apologize, you own up to your mistake, but then what? I feel like people still have this fear that it's going to like cycle really negatively and explode everything. So how do you deal with that fear? Like, I know it's really unlikely, right, for that to happen. Like once you actually start creating content, you'll realize that too. But again, I feel like people have all of these fears and objections before they even start. That is one of them I've heard again and again, especially from people who have built up a career, they've built up a reputation, and they don't want to tarnish it. How do you help them reframe that problem?
Yeah, it's a tough one. The one thing is I always say we create more stories in our heads, and the story that we've created in our head is not at all close to the reality in which things usually roll out. So I would say do a meditation on when was the last time where maybe I was texting with somebody and I thought they were mad at me because it was in a text message, or I thought they were getting frustrated or impatient with me or whatever. And then you saw them in person and it was like nothing had happened. It was big open arms and you enjoyed a coffee with each other. And it was just because you couldn't hear their tone of voice that you made assumptions based off of what you thought they were thinking and feeling. So I feel like the biggest thing is to pull back a little bit and ask yourself, am I projecting what I think this person is thinking or feeling, or is this really what's happening? And I would never communicate via text. If you're having any doubt about where you are in relation to that person, I would immediately get on the phone or immediately have a one-on-one conversation. And you'll probably find that it's not as bad as you think it is.
I love that because improving public speaking impacts so many areas of your life, like I talked about. And you might not think of it, but the skills you learn from public speaking or creating content, they also transfer to those one-on-one relationships and how you handle them. Yeah, I'm just like when you read a comment on social media and you're like, wait, is this what they mean or is that what they mean? But if it's coming from your friend, you actually have the option to just hop on a call. Or if it's coming from a colleague or your boss, like you could actually just talk it through and not be afraid of that. I guess that's one of the advantages of a community as well, right? Because you can actually get feedback. This is what that specific person in the audience was thinking when they made their face. And then you'll probably realize it's not what you think it is, you know?
No, I mean, I have a fun story. I directed a show many years ago. We had like this big fundraiser. So it was a sold out house. There was only one seat left. I feel like it was our last show too. There's a 3-person cast and I sat in the front row so they could see me. It was a thrust stage. They could see me. The actors could. And I was watching the show and I was delighted in how the comedy was coming together. I was looking at the audience members, watching them enjoying the show. And afterwards, one of the actors walks up to me and she says, "Did you hate the show?" I said, "No, I didn't hate the show." "Why?" She goes, "You looked upset the whole entire time that you were watching the show." And I was like, "I did?" She said, "Yes." And so what happened was she was projecting onto me. She thought I was thinking and feeling, which hindered her performance. She wasn't being present. So that was one thing. And the lesson there is don't assume that you know what your audience is thinking and feeling just because they have a certain look on their face. And then in the second thing it taught me, being in a leadership position, was that I need to be more self-aware of how I'm coming across, whether I'm sitting in an audience or whether I'm doing a Zoom call with somebody or whether I'm at a networking event. The way that I am, my physicality, my nonverbal cues are also sharing a message with people. So I always say to my clients, like, somebody could be sitting in the front row of your audience and someone forgot to pick their kid up at school, or they just got a parking ticket, or it's not about you.
That is such a hard lesson to internalize. I've been thinking about that as well. It's every meeting I have with someone from my community, it could impact what they think about me, what they decide to do with their life, and what I say in that moment could be based on my mood. What if I went into a meeting and was grumpy about it? What is the impact that would have? Like, if you're in a leadership position or a public position, it becomes more important than ever. People care about what you think. People care about your guidance. They value your thoughts. And so you actually are in a position of impact, and there's a bit of responsibility there to make sure that you're not letting your negative emotions cloud your interactions. I don't have an answer. It's just something I've definitely been thinking a lot more about.
Yeah. Well, I also feel like, too, like transparency is just a beautiful gift that you can give people. I was very much raised in the culture that you leave your stuff at the door. But I feel like just to be able to come into the room and just say, "I've had a really tough morning. My puppy's been sick and I'm feeling a little discombobulated right now. I just need a moment to land or arrive." That's an amazing gift that not only you get to give to yourself, but then everybody else in the room is like, "Oh my gosh, I don't want Sabrina to be here suffering. Like, let's lift her up," right? Go take some space. It just makes for such a much better work environment for everybody.
It's so fascinating you said that, because just the other day I was listening to a Hormozy podcast, and it was all about just be honest. The first half of it, he talked about all these stories where it's like, oh, like, should we lie to the customer? Should we what excuse should we make so they don't think we're dumb or like something broke and they're trying to hide the fact that it broke? And he was just like, let's just tell the truth. Let's just tell them exactly what happened. Honestly, the more I create content, and now I'm building an app as well, things break all the time. And initially I was like, oh man, people are going to think I suck. They're going to see my awesome content and they're going to see my V1 product and it's really crappy. It's not what I want at all. It's going to break all the time. It's going to have lots of bugs. And I was like, what is going to be my approach to handling all that? And I decided to just be honest all the time. If this broke because of this, I'm just going to explain it in my technical way, because that's what I'm good at. I can explain the tech, just make it simple to understand. And I hope that people will still use it because it's useful and will just forgive kind of these bugs and things that happen along the way. But it's been such a self journey to get to that point. Like, it's so tempting to not be transparent, to spin a different story, lie in the hopes of retaining a certain image. And so, yeah, I'm curious just your advice for folks who are grappling with that on a day-to-day basis. They want to maintain certain professional appearance, but what are the long-term consequences of hiding yourself?
First of all, when you can be transparent and say, "This is where I'm at. These are some bugs. I need to fix them. I know you're using this product. However," that's teaching people, first of all. You've just taught them what not to do. So it's educational for some folks. And I would much rather hear that than sit there frustrated. Oh, she's aware. She's going to be fixing it versus not knowing what the heck is going on and if I've just wasted my time and money, right? Okay. So it's funny because just yesterday, something similar happened where I'm on the board at my daughter's school and we book these assemblies, and I booked the last assembly. I was like, I have a very busy February and March. I want to hand this over. I shot out the email. I don't know if everyone read it. That's up for debate. But what ended up happening was we're getting closer and closer. It's Black History Month. We needed to book an assembly for Black History Month. We're getting closer and closer. I'm like, oh boy, we got to get that booked because of all the times in the world right now, this would be a really great month to not miss Black History Month. So I started the email chain again. And then we also have to book for Women's History Month, which is next month in March. I copy and paste from the assistant principal, sends a copy and paste of the available times and dates. So I just sent them forward, but I didn't differentiate. These dates are for Black History Month and these dates are for Women History Month. So then we double booked. Now we have 2 assemblies for Black History Month, one in February, and now we have a Black History Month performance in March. So this whole thing happened, and like 7 people are trying to communicate on like 3 different email threads and WhatsApp threads, and it was just ridiculous. So I was like, okay, Meredith, I'm the one who started this chain reaction. I could either pretend I didn't start that chain reaction. I could blame it on somebody else because they didn't look at the details. So I had choices, right? So because like you said, learn, right? We start to become self-aware and then we learn the benefits of being truth tellers. I just said, hey, this was my fault. This is what I should have done differently. I apologize.
And how did people react to that?
We moved forward. What else do? You just move forward. And then everyone came back. It's not your fault. Other people thought it was their fault. You know what I mean?
Isn't that the beautiful thing, though? It's like not a big deal. 99.9% of the time, it's okay.
So I am a big fan of just owning it. Just own your stuff. Own it.
Yeah, I know it's easier said than done, but you live so much lighter when you can just be yourself. And I know that's a lot easier said than done. And creating content has helped me realize that. And it's been a journey. It still is a journey. And as we close out the podcast here, how can folks find out more about your programs? I want to make sure anyone who's listening to this interested in improving their communication skills and overall confidence, honestly, in relating to people in a public or private setting, how can they join your program, learn more about how they can improve? And the tool you mentioned, Yoodli, just want to make sure people have access to that as well.
Yeah. So thank you for that. You can find me. So my program, it's called Confidently Speaking, and we meet Wednesdays from 4 to 5 p.m. Eastern time, or I have another class on Fridays from 12 to 1 p.m. Eastern time. That's members.confidentlyspeaking.fun. And then Grundei Coaching is my website. You can find me there. You can find me on LinkedIn. And then I'm on TikTok as well, where I'm just giving public speaking tips every day, almost every day. I'm not as consistent as you are. So I applaud you. I applaud you. But you can find me in then YouTube. I'm starting to get a little bit more invested in the YouTube channel. So I'm going to start doing more long form content there to help people with their structures and so forth.
I love that. Thank you so much for taking the time to join me on my podcast. This was really fun.
Yeah, thank you. It's such a delight.